Good evening. My name's Evan and welcome to Rockland Graves. 2022 has come to a close, and before I start wallowing in the post-New Year's resolution desolation, I want to take a look at some of my favorite horror movies of the year. I'd argue that 2022 was one of the most fruitful years we've had in a while for the genre and gifted us with some incredibly memorable and original movies as well as characters that will stick in the minds of horror fans for years to come. I didn't get around to reviewing all of these, and at some point I'd like to go back and give them the proper treatment they deserve. I'm not going to be ranking the movies because I just think there's too much variation in terms of, the intention that a certain film goes in with and variation in subgenre, so I'll just be listing these based on their release dates. Alright, without further ado, let's talk about my favorite horror movies from 2022. The Cursed. This was a pretty surprising movie. Werewolf stories have been told time and time again throughout the years, and this movie's take on it was very interesting and unique. The thing that really stood out to me was just how visually stunning this movie is. It was shot on film using anamorphic lenses, which is nuts for a movie of this budget, and the lighting and composition on display is gorgeous and lends itself really well to the dark atmosphere a movie like this needs. The Cursed is a dark period piece horror film from a director who had never tackled a project like this, so it's pretty impressive that this movie got a budget to begin with. It's not perfect, suffering from some blemishes in pacing, and the action scenes look awful with this blurry and very digital looking shaky cam that was likely to help hide some of the budgetary constraints with the creature design, but it still looks really bad when the action kicks up, especially compared to how beautiful the rest of the movie is. I think it went grossly under the radar and absolutely deserves a watch, especially if you like these, atmospheric countryside horror movies and you want to see an interesting twist on a story that we're all very familiar with. X. Ti West is the only filmmaker who made two of my favorite horror movies of the year, the first of which being X. Similar to The Cursed, this movie takes something that we're very used to seeing and gives a unique twist that more than justifies the price of admission. X took the slasher genre and delivered something with way more depth than I had anticipated. There's many examples of smart visual storytelling and extremely well-handled social commentary that had a genuine impact on me, touching on sexuality, aging, love, creativity, and probably more that I missed. The characters were all distinct and interesting, and the performances were fantastic. The movie warrants multiple rewatches as you'll pick up on more every time you watch it, and I seem to enjoy the movie more every single time. It also spawned a trilogy that will conclude with Maxine, and I just can't fucking wait for that movie. If I were ranking these movies, X would without a doubt be a contender for the top spot, but we've got more movies to look at. The Black Phone. If you've seen my review of this movie, you already know how much hyperbole I was throwing around. I fucking love The Black Phone. The Black Phone is just a straight up, no gimmicks, well-crafted and engaging horror movie. It was original in its presentation, and the grabber is a very memorable villain. I mentioned in my review that I felt so invested in the story and the characters, and the movie took me on a ride that I had such a good time with. Scott Derrickson has made some of my favorite horror films, and this continues to be the case with The Black Phone. Ethan Hawke, of course, delivered a great performance, especially considering his face is covered for a vast majority of the runtime, but what really blows me away is the performances from Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw as Finney and Gwen respectively. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a scene where Madeline McGraw's performance makes me tear up every time I watch it. It is so impressive what this 9-year-old child is able to draw from this character. I love how straight up this movie is. It's just great. It's really all I can say about it. Also, I feel weird referring to either of the child actors in this movie as child actors because, man, they are pulling some adult emotions extremely well. Barbarian. Okay, hi, Disney, Searchlight, I hope you have plans for this. This movie needs a Blu-ray release. I'm kind of scared because it doesn't have one yet, and it got released digitally, and I don't want that to be like them trying to push away physical media. Yeah, please, I'll buy it, you will make money. Deal? Okay. I knew absolutely nothing about Barbarian going into it. I didn't even see a trailer for it. I think all I'd seen was the poster. I was as blind about what was going on here as the characters were, and it made for a really engaging and suspenseful viewing. I will say though, I enjoyed the first half of the movie far more than the second half. The story gets told pretty messily, and the ending got a little silly in my opinion, but I had a great time with the movie regardless. It also has one of the most tense and suspenseful sequences of the year. I've only seen it once, and I definitely think a rewatch is in order. I think that I'll enjoy the second half of the movie more on another viewing, but I also don't think that the first half will grab me the same way, just, having seen the movie and knowing where things go now. I never knew what to expect for this one. One thing I can absolutely give it is that it just subverts your expectations at every single turn. I wouldn't give it my top spot, but it was so surprising and weird and different, and I like that kind of thing. Pearl. This was shot back to back with X, and the fact that Ty West released these movies 6 months apart is insane. That is so impressive considering the quality of these movies. Unlike X, Pearl is not a slasher film, but is instead a character study, and it's done with an equal amount of care. This kind of movie is hard to make, and Pearl was a resounding success. Mia Goth was great in X, but I honestly believe she's due an Oscar nomination for her performance in the prequel. She gives one of the best performances of the year and adds a lot of weight to this story. The set design and recreation of the time period is very immersive, and keeping in mind that this was made for $1 million makes it really impressive. It's an extremely well-made film, and Mia Goth's performance is riveting. I mean, man, Ty West is just on a roll, and if Maxine is as good as X and Pearl, then we're in for a horror trilogy for the books. Smile. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and it's another one that I knew nothing about going into it. I had seen a teaser, it was maybe like 20 seconds long, and it was just these still shots of people with these really creepy smiles on their faces, and that kind of vague, creepy, unsettling marketing is a surefire way to get me into the theater. I didn't need anything else after that. My ticket was bought the second I saw that teaser. And thankfully, I really enjoyed it. It's like if you took the story structure and the unrelenting nature of The Ring and smushed it together with some of the thematic elements from Hereditary. The opening scene of this movie was one of the scariest things I've seen all year, and while I didn't feel that the film consistently kept up that level, it's a start-to-finish nightmare that rarely gives you a moment to breathe. There are some extremely effective scares, but not all of it works. There are some moments that come across a little goofy, and I got really annoyed with certain aspects of the ending, but the things that work are so good that my gripes just weren't deal breakers. There's a lot that can be analyzed about the underlying themes of this movie, and as with X, I really appreciate the use of visual storytelling. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the scariest movie of the year for a lot of people. I do think that the first act was the strongest. I enjoyed it the most there, but it's a great watch the whole way through. Terrifier 2. Oh, I love this movie. This one was fucking great. I'm not a huge fan of the first Terrifier, but I did enjoy it the 2 times I watched it thanks to David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. Everything aside from that is way below par from a filmmaking standpoint. Terrifier 2 is a massive improvement over its predecessor in every single way. It's shot better, the story's better, the music's better, the characters are better. It's just a vastly superior movie by every possible metric. The atmosphere is less grimy than the first, so if you really like that vibe, you might find the more surreal tone in the sequel disappointing, but for me, I found this to be one of the most fresh slashers I've seen in a long time. David Howard Thornton does it again here, but the film really narrows down on what made Art so entertaining in the first movie and emphasizes those elements. It's the longest slasher movie I think I've ever seen, and while I know some had grievances with the length, I never found it dragged at all. It's a viciously violent movie, so be prepared for that going in. This one's absolutely gonna stick around, and we already have confirmation that there's more to come, and I would imagine with a higher budget because of how successful Terrifier 2 was. I'm so excited, I can't wait to see that one. Also, how fucking cool is this? My girlfriend got me this for Christmas. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. I still can't get that goddamn song out of my head. Halloween Ends. This was an oddball way to end a trilogy. After Halloween Kills, I didn't think we'd get a more divisive Halloween film for a long time, and Halloween Ends very quickly proved me wrong by becoming one of the most contentious horror films I've ever seen. And you know what? I have problems with this movie. It has a lot of issues that I'll get into more detail about when I make a full review, but I genuinely do think that it's a well-made film. It's not what I wanted from the conclusion to this trilogy, but Kills wasn't what I wanted after 2018 either, and that's since become a contender for my favorite sequel. Most of my issues with Ends stem from the context of where it sits as the concluding chapter to the Laurie Strode story, but I think it has a lot to offer. It's a unique twist on these films that allowed David Gordon Green to explore a theme he's clearly wanted to explore in all 3 of his Halloween films without demystifying Michael Myers. It's unorthodox, but we've had so many of these movies by now that I really don't mind the weird turns this one takes. This is more of a character-centric story, and I thought a lot of that was handled very well, although did feel underdeveloped in some instances. I wanted to see more from these characters, and I adore Frank and Laurie's relationship and badly wish it got more attention. There's an emotional edge that I felt genuinely touched by during some scenes, and without saying what it is, I think the final shot of the film is absolutely perfect and is a fantastic send-off for this storyline and its characters. I know, I probably sound super negative about this movie, but I'm more critical of it because it's a series that I am deeply familiar with and I put a nerdy and depressing amount of thought into. I'm gonna pick this one apart more than I would most films, and I'm sure my in-depth review will show that whenever I get around to making that, but I honestly do really like Halloween Ends, and I think I'm just gonna like it more as time goes on. There are even a few scenes in here that make me tear up. I can't lie to you. I would really like to see an extended cut of this film just to give things more time to breathe, but I'm not gonna hold my breath on it. We got it for Kills on the initial release, and the fact that, you know, this first release of Halloween Ends doesn't have an extended cut makes me think, okay, we're probably not getting one, but here's hoping. The novelization added some things that I would like to see in the movie, and I think solves some problems that a lot of people had with it. The menu. I know, this one might be stretching it for some people, but I'm a huge proponent of expanding the definition of horror because I think there's a very narrow perception of what is generally considered horror, but it's a much broader genre than it often gets credit for. This one would easily make my top 5 favorite movies of the year in general. I was shocked by how much I loved this one. It's a fantastic example of how film can comment on social issues without feeling overly preachy or on the nose. I could never quite tell what was going to happen next, and there was this sense of not knowing what was real and what was show that I really enjoyed. It's such an engaging and fun movie with an absolutely stacked cast who all gave the performances you'd expect from them. I can imagine that if you're a foodie, you might enjoy this film even more than I did, even if you do feel somewhat attacked. It was the last movie I saw in the theater in 2022, and what a send-off it was. It's the kind of thing that makes me excited about film as a medium, as nerdy as that sounds, and I'm so glad I caught it in a theater. Alright, well that concludes my personal list of my favorite horror films of 2022. Again, I think that was one of the best years for horror we've had in a long time. 2023 is also looking pretty stacked so far. That Evil Dead Rise trailer looks amazing. I can't wait to see that. I might make another video like I did last year where I'm talking about what movies I'm looking forward to in this coming year, so keep an eye out for that. Now I'd like to know what some of your favorite horror movies of the year were. Do you agree or disagree with some of my picks? Were there movies that I just completely missed that were a little smaller and you think I should check out? I always love those kinds of recommendations. I'll be back soon with some reviews that I've been really looking forward to making, but for now, thank you for stopping by Rockland Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.